All right, everyone, welcome in to episode 18 of the Instant Review podcast. We have made it through the 2021 NFL regular season, the first one to have 18 weeks. And guys, it was an absolute chaotic Sunday. Just probably one of the greatest final Sundays ever in NFL history. Just all the drama. We're going to break it all down as we get ready for Wild Card Weekend. 6 matchups from Saturday afternoon through Monday night to determine who will be the final 8 teams in the divisional round next week. And also, during the show, we're going to talk about some of the coaches that will no longer be with their organizations this year as they got a pink slipped on Black Monday/Tuesday. So, with that in mind, my name is Nicholas Hill. I'm the host here of Instant Review Podcast. I am joined by Leon Taryan and Conor Kennedy, as always. Guys, how are we feeling here? The end of the regular season, no more NFL Red Zone, but it is time to start figuring out who will be raising the Lombardi Trophy.
Things are going to start to get hectic. My Bills are facing the much-hated Patriots in the wild card round. Things are going to be tense. We see Nick up there, or I did wrong directions. Right up there. He gets to sit on his couch for a whole week, just chill and watch the wild card games because his Titans are the 1 seed. Meanwhile, I'm in the gulag. I'm in the torture chamber. It's either going to be the best night ever or the worst night. It's going to be wild. But, I'm sure Leon Taryan right now is feeling kind of relieved. Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman are finally out of New York. How are you feeling?
Feeling good. I'm hoping for a nice fresh start. Hopefully the Russell Wilson era can be upon us soon, but let's just go into the draft, get some good linemen, because it looks like the plan is to still stick with Daniel Jones. So let's see what we could do to at least break 4 wins next season. We need something new. We need a new culture. We need everything new.
Yeah, it was hilarious too about the offensive line. Is the offensive line coach for the Giants bolted before the Judge news came out today, and he's now going to be the offensive coordinator at the University of Florida. So we'll see how that works for them, because obviously the offensive line with the New York Jets has been nothing short of terrible for the past couple of seasons. But we're going to first start off with what has happened in Week 18, that final Sunday, really Saturday and Sunday, but really Sunday was the standout day of football. And Leon, we got to talk about the drama that unfolded in Las Vegas Sunday night.
The best game I have seen in a long, long time. I think this was the best game this season. The Raiders and the Chargers. Interestingly enough, 3 teams' playoff stipulations were on the line at this point, including the Pittsburgh Steelers. But what a great job by Derek Carr. Even though he didn't have the biggest standout stat line, he still led his team to victory. Justin Herbert converting all those 4th downs and making a big comeback towards the end of the game. I think if this game tied and seeing the Chargers in the playoffs would have been interesting, but now Derek Carr gets back into the playoff picture. He was 12-4 one season, and I think he got hurt, so he didn't get to participate in the playoffs. So he now makes his playoff debut in the 2022 wildcard round against the Cincinnati Bengals. But this was one of the most fun games to watch. Hunter Renfrow really coming into his own in Las Vegas. And guys, I don't know. Maybe the Raiders can cause some upsets and against the Bengals in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean that Raiders team, they started out really strong earlier in the season, and then of course all that drama happened. John Gruden resigned, and then Henry Ruggs got arrested. I think one of their corners that they drafted in 2020 also was released by the team, and they just kind of went on a skid. And a lot of people, I know I said this on the podcast, I thought the Raiders were dead in the water. It was the kind of thing where, kind of like the 2020 season also, where they started out really strong and they fell to 8-8. I kind of just felt like I couldn't trust the Raiders, but especially these past couple weeks, they've really come together, and I think they could potentially beat the Bengals, but I'm not completely confident, but they've been playing really well. They beat a really good Colts team, and they also just beat the Chargers in probably the best regular season game of the longest season in the NFL so far. I mean, who knows? That defense could definitely eat against this Bengals O-line, which, is better than last season, but then again, it should be better. They released Bobby Hart, but it's definitely going to be interesting seeing what they can do in the playoffs. And it's good to see a guy like Derek Carr, a guy that's like kind of been under the microscope a little bit, especially from Raiders fans who have been kind of unhappy, ever since the 2016 MVP caliber performance before he got injured that season. The Raiders haven't come back to the postseason, but now they're playing in the wild card round. I think it would be a good thing to keep Derek Carr in Las Vegas. And I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, and what's crazy about the Raiders? They were 6-7 after that 48-9 loss to the Chiefs. Do you want to guess what their average margin of victory is in their last 4 games? It's 3 points. They won by 2 at Cleveland, 4 against the Broncos, and then 3-point wins at the Colts, and then at home against the Chargers. These dudes have been living on the edge for the last month, but they found ways to win each and every single one of those games. And you just have to give them all the credit in the world. They could have folded. They probably should have folded. I think most teams would have folded at 6-7 after all the turmoil. But you got to give Rich Basilia, Derek Carr, and just the rest of that team a lot of credit. Because you got to remember, when you look at Derek Carr, he didn't have his best weapon most of this year in Darren Waller. He was having to rely on a bunch of backups. You lost Henry Ruggs, his main outside presence. Josh Jacobs was in and out of the lineup all year with injury. But they're just a strong-willed team, and that's a team that you don't really want to face in the playoffs, a team that is really hard to kill. And if I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan, I'm perhaps a little nervous about that matchup just because it just seems like there's always one of those teams that comes in on a hot streak and just refuses to die. Now, I kind of want to look at the opposite side of this on the Chargers side. And we got to talk about Brandon Staley. What was he thinking? It was pretty clear the Raiders were content on playing for a tie, or maybe a late Hail Mary or something, or a really long field goal. There was no reason for the Chargers to take a timeout with, 38 seconds left in overtime. The Chargers weren't going to get the ball back and be able to do anything. They literally needed 20 plays in 2 minutes at the end of regulation to tie the game and put it into overtime. You weren't doing that much because the offensive line was getting destroyed all night. Rashawn Slater was getting owned by Max Crosby. And, Justin Herbert has to be commended for his performance because he was able to stand in there, deliver big-time throw after big-time throw to keep the Chargers in that game. But this is not the first time Brandon Staley has cost the Chargers a game. Just think about the Chargers game, the second one from a couple of weeks ago. All those times that they won 4 on 4th down when they probably should have kicked it and taken points was the difference between the Chargers having a chance down the stretch here of having the AFC West be in their grasp to having to be in this win or tie or go home situation. And, just coaching once again bit the Chargers. And I know Brandon Staley is a first-year head coach, but he's going to have to do some reevaluation because if stuff like this happens again next year, he's not going to have that job because the Chargers had 11 to 12 win talent, especially on the opposite side of the ball. They had defensive talent that didn't perform up to expectations, but their offense was more than capable enough in this AFC of getting them to the playoffs. And the fact they didn't make it in a 17 playoff when a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers made the playoffs is an absolute failure. I was kind of asked, do you blame the Chargers missing the playoffs more on Brandon Staley? Do you blame him more on the defense? Or is it just a combination of all? Because I know we've been kind of deriding them as the AFC Falcons, but this just feels like such an unbelievable choke job that it's just unbelievable because it's probably one of the most talented teams ever to not make the playoffs.
I do agree with criticizing Brandon Staley on some of his game time decisions this past Sunday, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Now, I think we've kind of all seen this quote from Derek Carr after the game on Sunday, on social media, where he was asked about if the Raiders offensively Their strategy or philosophy changed after that timeout from Brandon Staley with 30 seconds left on the clock. Of course, he said it definitely did, obviously, but after that, he followed it up with, but we knew no matter what, we didn't want to tie. We wanted to win the football game. Now, the Raiders were running the ball on that drive, but they were doing it pretty well. And as we all know, this Chargers run defense is not very good. They were making like pretty significant headway down the field. And I think that potentially, no matter what Staley did or decided, I think that they could have potentially run the ball down the field efficiently enough to at least either get into field goal range or score a touchdown. It's not just tie baby, it's just win baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but still, do you think not do you think, but I think how Justin Herbert's had such a good year, I will put some of the blame on Staley because they did lose to the Texans, a game that they were not supposed to lose at all. So I think they really did choke away the season with a lot of these decisions and going for it on fourth down against the Chiefs multiple times in a game that they were supposed to win. So I think some of the play calling, you have to blame it on that. Of course, football is a team game, but Brandon Staley's got to make better decisions going forward because I would have liked to see them in the playoffs because a lot of quarterbacks are making their debut in the playoffs next week, like Joe Burrow, like Mac Jones, like Derek Carr. And I would have liked to see the Chargers there instead of the Steelers, to be honest. It would have been more competitive, in my opinion, more fun to watch.
One criticism that I have of Brandon Staley in terms of his decision-making during that game that I think not a lot of people are criticizing him for is fourth down in overtime. As we all know, this past Chargers season, they've been going for it on fourth down a lot. And they've been kind of dying on that hill, no matter how it ends up for them, whether it's, some perfect examples include their Chiefs matchups. At Arrowhead, they went for it on fourth and long, and that ended up helping them to win the game. Meanwhile, they went for it on fourth down, I think 2 or 3 times in the red zone when they were at SoFi Stadium playing the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football, and it didn't work out for them quite so well. I think that going for it on fourth down in overtime, even though it's pretty easy to say, hey, you know what, screw it, let's just take the points. I don't have too much of a problem with that, but I think with the fourth down conversions that they were making, on that final drive before the end of regulation, you got a generational talent at quarterback, and he's making these clutch passes, and you're trying to win this game, punch your ticket to the playoffs, and kick your divisional rival out. Might as well go for it on fourth.
So we do have a viewer question on Antonia Brown, and obviously we talked a lot about this last week. Not really a lot of updates. I know he was hanging around in New York with Fabio Foreign, just kind of doing Antonia Brown stuff. I mean, pretty much all of my opinions on Antonia Brown are the opinions I had from last week. He's probably done in the NFL, and I hope he gets the help that he needs. Any other thoughts from you two on Antonia Brown?
So I think some of us saw that snippet of him on the Nelk podcast. And they were really buttering him up. He was kind of complaining about the contract that he got. He was like, oh, why am I paid, this little amount of money? Meanwhile, Gronk and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin make all this money. I'm the best receiver on the Bucs. Do we agree with Antonio Brown being the best receiver on the Bucs? I'm not sure if I do.
No,
yeah,
hell no. He's not even the second best. He's the third best, or was the third best.
Yeah, because like
really
Mike Evans,
fourth if you count Gronk.
Yeah, because like even though Gronk's lost a step, clearly he still has that connection with Tom Brady, and he's at least like a tier 2 tight end. Mike Evans was a Pro Bowler before Tom Brady went there. Chris Godwin's pretty good too. B can be productive, but he's clearly lost a step. He's not that number 1 wide receiver in the league that he was in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, he's definitely past his prime by the time he was in Tampa Bay, but he was still a solid player. And unfortunately, this had to happen where he had this sort of meltdown Not really sure what really happened or what really transpired, to be honest, but I don't really see it helping their playoff chances. And if AB was still in the playoffs, if AB was still on this team and that didn't happen, I'm still Green Bay all the way for the Super Bowl. That's the way I feel on the NFC side for my prediction.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that story progresses. But kind of getting back here to the AFC, and I kind of just want to just briefly talk about why that scenario was even available in the first place. The Colts, the Indianapolis Colts, choking it in Jacksonville, 26-11. It was 26-3. Carson Wentz, my goodness, he just was a turnover machine throughout the game. Trevor Lawrence had probably his best performance of his rookie year. Is this the end of the line for Carson Wentz? Because it feels like to me that the Indianapolis Colts are kind of stuck with him for another year, considering that the upcoming draft class isn't very good. Maybe you can go and get another quarterback through free agency or trading, but I feel like they're stuck between a pickle and a hard place because you've got an amazing running back. You probably got the second best running back, in my opinion, behind Derrick Henry. Yes, that might be biased, but that's a debate for another day. But and you got a really good defense, but Carson Wentz is holding the team back, and that's very obvious. And that's the reason why they blew the last 2 weeks after having 2 amazing wins. Because remember, they beat the Patriots and the Cardinals back to back, and then they come out, lose to the Raiders, giving them a chance to play their way in, and then just laying an egg in Jacksonville, a place they haven't won since 2014. Just your brief thoughts on the demise of the Colts and Carson Wentz.
I just want to say first that was right about my bet. Just want to say that. Anyways, to move on to more serious stuff. Obviously Carson Wentz crapped the bed in Jacksonville. And I mean, like he's clearly isn't the same player that he was like in 2017. He's definitely improved from his last year in Philly, but I mean, that's not saying much. I will say though, I think as long as he kind of just hands off the ball, they limit him to like maybe like 20, 25 throws a game. He can be efficient. He can be good. I mean, looking at his stats right now, he completed 62.4% of his passes this season. He threw for 3,563 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks, 94.6% passer rating. So those are really good numbers, but Carson Wentz clearly isn't. He isn't a quarterback that can really carry your team necessarily, and I think that was in some games, like the Bills game, you saw Jonathan Taylor with all of those touches running for over 200 yards. Like I think that's the kind of Colts team that can win a lot of games, but they've strayed from that a little bit, especially within this Jacksonville game where they trusted Carson Wentz a bit too much. And I think another good example of that is that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game that they played. You can't just, he's not an elite quarterback. Like I was saying earlier, you can't really put the game in the hands of Carson Wentz because you don't know if he can really pull it off and help you get a game-winning drive, or if he turns into Carson Wentz. I mean, I don't think that they move on from Carson Wentz next year. He has a $15 million cap hit next year, but there will be a $0 cap hit if they cut him after the 2022 season. So I definitely perhaps explore maybe drafting a quarterback. They didn't make the playoffs, so they have a relatively good draft pick, and none of the quarterbacks I think are going. They probably aren't going in the top 5. There will be like an all right prospect sitting there wherever they pick. I don't know exactly. Maybe he can sit for like a year under Wentz. If Wentz falters like even more than he did this season, then perhaps you could start that guy instead of Carson. And that would be a better quarterback option. But I think part of what their philosophy is, and I'll end my point in like a minute, is the quarterback situation into Indy since Frank Reich came in. Now in 2018, he had Andrew Luck, obviously, generational prospect coming into the league, and he was great. It's just that he was injured so much because they didn't put together a top tier offensive line in front of him. So they lost him after a year. So he had to roll with Jacoby Brissett. Obviously, we all know what happened there. They missed the playoffs, losing record. Brissett, not that good. And then 2020, Philip Rivers comes in. That was a pretty good campaign, honestly. And of course, they made the wild card. Lost by a hair to the Bills. And then Rivers retires. But what I'm trying to say with this is that they had, besides Brissett, they had two really good quarterbacks, Andrew Luck and Philip Rivers, even though he was at the tail end of his career. You could trust those guys to carry you to a good amount of wins and win games for you. But now you got Carson Wentz. He's been hurt quite a bit, and I think he's lost a bit of his moxie and confidence ever since that 2020 season. So, I think they just got to change their philosophy a bit with Carson Wentz, and hopefully they'll make it back to the playoffs next year.
That was definitely a shocker not to see the Colts in the playoffs, because I talked about it in the past on how they are a team that is solid, and it was at one point the best team in the league, not just looking at the record, but how they were playing the game of football. And to see them not in the playoffs is really tough, because I thought they could have had the potential to make some upsets in the AFC playoffs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they were a team that absolutely scared me because, obviously the Titans swept them this year, but both of those games were really close. And that first matchup, the Colts just had some red zone miscues. If they had converted, they could have won that game. And then the second time when we had to go up to Indianapolis, the Colts should have won that game, but they made some key mistakes at the end. Again, Carson Wentz fumbling it in the end zone kind of helped the Titans win that one. So it's just, if you look at just 3 to 4 just crucial mistakes throughout the season, is why they're not in the playoffs. And, as good as Jonathan Taylor is, you got to have at least a good enough quarterback. Like, it kind of like look at the Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry dynamic in Tennessee. Like, Ryan Tannehill is good enough to get the Titans over the top with Derrick Henry behind him. Carson Wentz, unfortunately, kind of reminds me a lot more of Marcus Mariota when he was with Derrick Henry at Tennessee, where it's just Mariota was clearly holding the offense back. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the Colts do, because they still have a ton of talent. I mean, they have 7 Pro Bowlers, which is a record for the amount of Pro Bowlers on a team that didn't make the playoffs, which is insane considering we have that extra playoff spot now. So as we'll get more into the playoffs a little bit later, but Connor, let's talk about some of that NFC wildcard matchups. Of course, that was the 4:00 window, and we had some high drama out west again.
Yes. All right. So the 49ers played against the Rams, and the Saints played against the Falcons. Both of those teams were vying for at least the 6th seed in the NFC, vying for a playoff spot. Of course, the Saints, at least their quarterback position, it's been, really, really weird situation ever since Drew Brees retired. They started off with Jameis Winston. He gets a season-ending injury, so they start to roll Trevor Siemian. He ends up beating the Bucs, and they roll with him for a couple games until I think they played the Bills, and after that game, they decided to start rolling with Taysom Hill. They signed him to an extension. They're paying him all this money. He has higher upside than Siemian. Might as well try him. He was good on the ground, but not as good throwing the ball. And then he ended up starting this game against the Atlanta Falcons in order to win a playoff spot. And he wasn't too bad, honestly. Pulling up his stats, I'd say, let me see. Have it up here. Okay. He completed 7 to 9 passes for 107 yards and a touchdown, and also ran for 18 yards on 5 carries. But he ended up leaving the field with a Liz Frank injury, so here comes Trevor Siemian. They end up winning that game 30-20. However, they are not in the playoffs because the 49ers pulled off the upset in overtime, 27-24, playing the Los Angeles Rams. Jimmy G didn't look all that good, honestly. He threw for a touchdown and 2 picks. He did pass for 316 yards, so it was somewhat better than some of his other games, considering how how well he didn't play in Tennessee. He threw a pass to Juwan Jennings. He's a pretty underrated guy. And also Deebo Samuel, like, I'm just gonna say, like, they could pull off an upset in this playoffs against the Dallas Cowboys, and part of that is because of Deebo Samuel and the way that he's been carrying this offense throughout the whole season. I mean, he could catch passes, he can run for touchdowns. Like, I'd argue that he's probably the most important part of this Niners offense, and that's considering that they have one of, if not the best tight end in the league in George Kittle. And of course they pulled off the upset against the Rams, like I said earlier. Matt Stafford turned into Stat Padford, and turned into some of his bad Detroit ways. He threw a game-losing interception in overtime, and that ended up clinching a playoff berth for their division rivals. Of course, the Saints are out. A big question mark about the quarterback position. Do they draft a quarterback? Do they try and win the Russell Wilson sweepstakes or bring in another veteran quarterback under center? And they're also still on cap hell. So who knows what they're going to do, what kind of cap gymnastics they're going to try to accomplish. Meanwhile, the Niners are back in the playoffs after their injury bowl 6-10 season last year. Of course, as we all know, the season before they went to the Super Bowl with Jimmy G. They're probably moving on from him after this season, but I think they're definitely good enough to at least win against the Cowboys. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think Jimmy G, it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up, because I think a team like Indianapolis actually could look into Jimmy Garoppolo. I think it'd be a good fit in Indianapolis. He could actually kind of fit what they're trying to do, because he doesn't have to, throw for 500 yards a game in Indy to win. But he's just got to take care of the football, unlike Carson Wentz, who really put him in some bad situations. But, on the Saints, I think if Jameis Winston doesn't get hurt, I think they're a playoff team. They had a really good defense. They had okay weapons. Obviously, Alvin Kamara is awesome, but their receiving core is severely lacking. And I think their first-round pick next year needs to be a wide receiver. There's a couple of options out there. We'll break that down in the offseason. But the Saints absolutely need to draft a wide receiver. They might have one of the worst receiving cores in the entire league. But the 49ers, just a very gutsy one. You go down 17-0 in the first half. You could kind of fold it in. But you got to give them credit. They kind of fought back, kind of thanks to Matthew Stafford throwing 2 interceptions, which is really concerning if you're a Rams fan, because you need him to be on his top of his game. But we do have to remember, he's never won a playoff game. And he has a horrible record against over 500 teams in his career. Now, I know a lot of that is he was on the Lions. But it wasn't like the Lions teams he was on were just completely terrible. I mean, he had Megatron for most of that. So is he going to be able to get it done? We'll have to wait and see. And I do think that the efforts of Deebo Samuel and Juwan Jennings really just helped the Niners get over to the top. Of course, Juwan Jennings is a guy I've been watching for years. He was a 7th-round draft pick last year out of Tennessee. And, of course, if you might remember him catching a Hail Mary his freshman year in 2016 to beat the Georgia Bulldogs, who just won the national title last night. And, it's just a really interesting story about him. And so it's really cool to see him get 2 touchdowns in this game, including the game-tying touchdown. He's really, the way he's blown up this year is something to watch. He's turned into basically the wide receiver free on this team, behind Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Like, he's become that slot receiver. He's a shorter guy, but he's very tough. He'll make catches, and the thing about him, he's very agile. He can make a ton of dudes miss, but he can burn you deep as well. So definitely that's a guy to watch moving forward. Juwan Jennings, I think he could be maybe not a superstar in this league, but I think he could be a consistent receiver for years to come, just because he plays extremely hard, and he's going to be great whether he's in San Francisco or wherever else he ends up on his journey. But I do think the 49ers as a whole have a good shot, like Connor said, of pulling out the upset against the Cowboys, because I really like that defense. They have been one of the best units throughout the season. And, I think the Cowboys have been kind of shaky at times, which we're going to talk about that later. But, Leon, what was your
agree.
thoughts on this game?
Because we've talked about this before, and I do think the 49ers have a chance of upsetting the Cowboys. But I think the only thing standing in their way, if you guys watch the game against the Rams, Jimmy G has a cast around his thumb. So whenever he goes back to drop back and pass, is it gonna affect his accuracy? Will he be able to pull it off against the Cowboys? Because I think this game's going to be more higher scoring, even though they both have good defenses. But I definitely see this being – it could be a close one. It could be 31-28 either way. But as of right now, up there with the Bills and Patriots, this seems to be one of the more interesting playoff matchups as we move forward into next week.
Yeah, I think 49ers, Cowboys, Rams, Cardinals, and Bills, Patriots are the top 3 matchups of the weekend. I think easily Steelers, Chiefs is going to be the worst. Perhaps Eagles, Bucks, and I think Raiders, Bengals has the potential to be really good. That's just kind of how I view it. But we'll definitely talk way more about all that. So just to kind of wrap up the Week 18 discussion here, we're able to talk about the Tennessee Titans. As we mentioned earlier on in the show, they clinched the 1 seed for the first time since 2008, and they will not have to play on Wild Card Weekend, joining the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers and the Titans get automatic passes to the divisional round. Of course, the Titans had a bit of a stressful game because they raced out to a 21-0 lead at halftime. Everything seemed fine, but then Davis Mills just turned it on. Him and Danny Amendola, who I didn't realize was even playing in the league, they just lit up the Titans defense the entire second half. And it took some heroics from Ryan Tannehill. It looked like at one play he was about to get sacked, but was able to get out of the defender's clutches and deliver a beautiful downfield strike. Julio Jones finally got his first touchdown in a Titans uniform in this game in the most crucial moment. And it wasn't pretty, but the Titans got it done, and they are the number 1 seed. Now, a lot of people I don't think are necessarily giving the Titans much of a shot here. Obviously, Derrick Henry is going to be back for the playoffs. He was back at practice last week. I don't know how confident I actually feel. Like, I don't feel very confident because obviously we don't know who we're going to play yet. And it's going to be hard to beat some of these teams twice because theoretically the AFC title game most likely is probably going to be against the Chiefs or the Bills, teams that the Titans have beaten. But, it's really hard to beat a good team twice. The Bills had a very good shot of winning that game. The Titans had to stop them at the end. And, of course, the Titans blew out the Chiefs 28-3. But I don't think the Titans are going to be able to do that 2 times in a row. And shout out to my friend Gustavo from Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil. But, just kind of your thoughts on the Titans getting that 1 seed and where do you see them? Because obviously, to me at least, the one thing I want to see, I think the difference in this postseason between last postseasons, if the Titans want to make it to Los Angeles, it's going to be Ryan Tannehill because obviously we know what Derrick Henry can bring. We know what A.J. Brown can bring, and if Julio Jones is on his game and is able to stay healthy, we know what he can bring. But if you look at Ryan Tannehill's stat lines from the previous 2 postseasons, he didn't really do a ton in the wins at New England and Baltimore 2 years ago. And then when the Titans had to turn to him last year, to turn to him in Kansas City, he wasn't able to get it done. Last year against Baltimore, they did a very good job of slowing down Derrick Henry, forced the ball into Ryan Tannehill's hands. He wasn't able to get it done. As great as he's been in the regular season throughout the past 3 years, and I know he took a step back this year, he has not been great in the postseason. And that perhaps is my chief concern because his defense is playing way better. It has improved significantly. Probably one of the most improved defenses in the entire league. But I don't know if I really trust Ryan Tannehill. Like, if we have to have him late in the game, can I trust Ryan Tannehill to win the Titans a big playoff game?
I mean, anything's possible. I mean, y'all went on that deep playoff run not too long ago in 2019 in that postseason. And y'all beat not only the Patriots ending their dynasty, but y'all also beat the Ravens, who were 14-2 at that time. They were an absolute juggernaut on offense with Lamar Jackson. Their defense wasn't too shabby either. Of course, y'all fell to the Chiefs, but definitely an amazing season then. And then, of course, in 2020, y'all went 11-5, but sadly fell to the Ravens in the wild card round. And honestly, I don't know. I think that y'all will probably play the Bengals in the divisional round if I'm just going off a hunch here. But also y'all could play the Raiders. Of course, a lot of it depends on your run defense, or on their run defense rather. Because I mean, Ryan Tannehill has definitely been playing better ever since AJ Brown came back. And Julio Jones, like, while he didn't really show up too much earlier in the season, I know he was on injured reserve for a little bit, but he really showed up in that Texans game. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't sleep on that passing attack too much. But of course, the most important thing about just the Titans team in general is their running back, King Henry, of course. The Titans have just been a different team without him, and they've looked definitely weaker. I don't 100% trust them to make a deep playoff run. They aren't too inspiring, at least to me. But there was that stretch earlier in the season. They beat the Bills, they beat the Chiefs. They were looking like a 1-seed team, and they were looking like the best team in the conference. So we could see a return to that, especially if this defense really shows up, which it's definitely way better than it was last year. Of course, I have some questions about their secondary, especially after that game with the Texans, with Davis Mills and Danny Amendola lighting it up. I have no clue, honestly. Like I said earlier, I don't have too much confidence in them, but I wouldn't doubt it if they made a deep run.
I mean, just imagine if Derrick Henry was healthy all season. Would they have really been 12-5 with a 1 seed? I think they might have been better.
Yeah.
They probably could have had 14 or 15 wins. I mean, it's just ridiculous how he was able to run through all teams. And I think he had a shot at breaking Eric Dickerson's 2,000-something yard record, but he could have had 2,000-yard seasons in a row. He could have broken that record.
Yeah.
I think if Henry was healthy and he broke that record, he could chase that motto of being the greatest running back of all time. It's very possible because he puts a big distance between him and other top running backs in the league. Like with Jonathan Taylor, although Jonathan Taylor is great, Jonathan Taylor is not going to break the tackles that Derrick Henry breaks. So
right.
Henry does it all. I really thought he was going to be MVP this season, and then I saw another statistic where even with the 937 yards he had this season, I think it said he was still 6th in rushing in the league. So he was that dominant. And I'm excited to see a Titans-Bengals or a Titans-Raiders matchup to see if Henry is still the same player or if Ryan Tannehill could still be a good game manager. But if they played the Bengals, I'm not sure what to go with on this one. But if they play the Raiders, I definitely take the Titans in that one.
Yeah, honestly, I'll say my game picks later on Raiders, Bengals, but I will say this, it might have been a blessing in disguise because here's why. Because I think we keep Derrick Henry, we might have had the 1 seed locked up 2 weeks ago. And I think we would have probably rested players in Houston. And we've seen that backfire in the past. Like I think the Ravens back 2 years ago really were hurt because remember, they rested in week 17. And basically it was 3 weeks in between games for the Ravens first team. And I think it really cost him against the Titans because you could just tell they were a little out of sync. They weren't all together. And sometimes resting players really kind of backfires. Like that's why the Packers played with their first string for at least a little bit of the Lions game, just to give them reps. We saw Tom Brady played early the entire game against Carolina. Because I think basically the wisdom at this point is not to rest players. And obviously Titans couldn't because they had to win this last game. And you got to give credit to the Texans for fighting because they could have just laid over when they were down 21-0. But David Coley was definitely inspired that team, and I don't think he should be fired because there's rumors of that. And to kind of transition into Black Monday and Tuesday talk, obviously David Coley's job is currently safe, but we'll have to wait and see what happens throughout the week. But 4 head coaches have gotten the axe throughout the past 2 days. And Leon, I know you're happy about a certain someone who will no longer be roaming the silence in the Meadowlands.
Yeah, might be the best news all season, to be honest. But it's been tough with Joe Judge, 10-23 career record in 2 seasons. Everybody in the Twitter sphere is happy over this firing, and all we could really think about is what are we going to do moving forward in the draft. I know it looks like Daniel Jones looks like we're still going to keep him as the starter, even though Gettleman is gone. So if there are different plans, we'll see what happens. Like I said, I would hope for Russell Wilson, a couple more offensive linemen to come. But as of right now, I think we go into the offseason looking to address O-line issues. I think we have a solid receiving core. Our defense is young, and they can compete. It just looks like the motivation was gone, and that's why they were giving up points. We have a solid kicker in Graham Gano. Tight ends look fine. Obviously, Andrew Thomas's potential on the offensive line. Saquon Barkley, I think, is the big question, though, because I think as much as I'm a big fan of him, we might have to trade him away because Devontae Booker was honestly more effective than Saquon Barkley this season. And then obviously with the quarterback situation, Mike Glennon, Jake Fromm. Glennon probably gets cut. Fromm probably gets cut and probably gets sent to play somewhere else in preseason. So I would imagine that we still go after O-linemen. We still maybe fight for a quarterback in the offseason and free agency. But in the draft, I know we have those 2 first-round picks. I'd like to see us go after like an Evan Neal, an offensive tackle out of Alabama, definitely to strengthen our O-line.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was worried for you guys, like at least like these past couple of days. I mean, there were reports earlier that was saying that Joe Judge and Daniel Jones were going to stay in New York. And then yesterday I was hearing about like, oh, Joe Judge is going to meet with his team and discuss the future next year. And man, you could just tell in that one press conference that was circling around this past week where he just like kind of aggressively was talking about, oh, we're not like some of those other clown show organizations in the NFL. I've got players begging me to bring them back next season. You know, like you could just tell that this guy was in over his head. You know, he tries to do the whole Belichick thing, and it ends up not working for him. But honestly, sometimes it's not even a Belichick way. It's like a college level coach approach. The things that I was hearing in training camp, you know, after that fight, some like big fight where Daniel Jones ended up at the bottom of the pile, he started like yelling at his players, like making them do like laps around the field and all this like other like drill stuff. And I think we've also seen just, man, the Giants ever since 2017 in general have just been a shit show, honestly. Like,
yeah. Like even though we had more wins than Jacksonville, we have the same exact wins as the Jets and the Texans. The Lions, yes, the Lions they're 3-14-1, I think, right? Yeah, Lions had 3 wins now, right?
Yeah.
The Packers, it just feels like we were worse than those teams. And if we didn't have Daniel Jones, let's say Mike Glennon was our starter or Jake Fromm, we would have been 0-17 easily.
Yeah,
easily.
I mean, I saw a stat from the beginning of last year that the Giants were like the worst in basically every single major offensive category. It's just embarrassing what the product was. Freddie Kitchens had no idea how to fix that. Or Pat Shermer didn't have an idea of how to fix that. And that's what happens when you hire a special teams coach. Don't hire special team coaches as your coordinator. Just because someone breathes the same air as Nick Saban and Bill Belichick doesn't mean they're going to be a good coach. Sorry. I hope we all learned your lesson. Of course, we've had to learn that lesson and many times throughout the years for some of the teams that I follow in terms of trying to get some of the brilliance of Nick Saban on their roster. And if you just look at the roster of coaches that were on the Giants, a lot of them were also failed coaches, such as like a Jeremy Pruitt or a Derek Dooley. But I digress. It just wasn't going to work. And we've seen a theme where I think a lot of the criticisms that Connor brought up also could apply to an Urban Meyer, where they applied this college mentality to the NFL, and you just can't do that. Like college and NFL are 2 different beasts. The NFL is grown men versus college kids, who are, they're young men who are trying to develop their sense of identity. He's a great man who know who they are. They know what they want. They want to be respected because this is their job. They're showed up to pay or getting paid to play football. And clearly Joe Judge just seemingly didn't respect that. And I think that, doesn't help the morale. And that's why, as Leon said, that's why the Giants down the stretch were just terrible. I mean, literally, the game a couple weeks ago in Chicago, every single one of us sitting here had more passing yards than the New York Giants that day. It's just, it was just a shame. And really, I think if you're the NFL, you got to be concerned because between the Giants and the Jets, your largest media market right now is completely tuned out because the teams are objectively terrible. It kind of reminds me of the NBA a decade ago when both the Knicks and the Nets were horrible. Now, that's obviously changed over there. But I think the NFL has to be hoping and praying that the New York Giants are going to come back sooner rather than later. But I do want to transition over to probably the firing that shocked me the most. Brian Flores out in Miami. And apparently this had to do with a dispute that he had with the Miami Dolphins general manager over the decision whether or not Chris Grier whether or not to bring in Deshaun Watson. And Flores really wanted to bring in Deshaun Watson. The rest of the Miami Dolphins organization disagreed. And apparently this created a rift so large that the Dolphins decided they could no longer have Flores on. Now, the Dolphins had a horrible start to the year. They were 1-7. They didn't look very good. But they won 7 straight games and were in position to make the playoffs until they lost last week to my Titans, a game I went to. And, I know they got a meaningless win against the Patriots on Sunday to finish 9-8. But I do think that when all things considered, considering that Tua Tagovailoa was probably holding Brian Flores back, I don't really understand why the Miami Dolphins fired Brian Flores. I mean, just look at the fan reaction for the Dolphins online. Like they are so confused. I mean, last year they had a win and get scenario in Buffalo, and they got blown out there. But I mean, at some point, you let a guy build his culture, he's going to eventually crack that top 7. And I feel like the Dolphins, unless they land a big hire here, I really don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I've had some questions about the Dolphins organization this past year. I'd say they started kind of popping up within the offseason, some of the surprise cuts like Kyle Van Noy, but also last season, I think the way that they handled bringing in Tua in terms of benching Ryan Fitzpatrick, when Fitzpatrick was honestly not doing bad, especially considering how bad Ryan Fitzpatrick can be at sometimes. But then like benching Tua in the fourth quarter in a lot of games for Fitzpatrick, in terms of that's probably my only criticism of Flores. But also like some of the draft picks, Tua's been playing a lot better, for sure, but they also did miss on drafting him over Justin Herbert. They did draft Jalen Waddle, which was a good pick, but the way that they handled like the trades, trading down at first, but trading back up, was a little confusing to me. I don't know why they decided to just give away that other first rounder. But also just, I don't know, the way Chris Grier's handled his business in Miami, I think that he was the problem, as well as Stephen Ross. He's an owner who I've heard Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk about this guy before. He's from New York and he lives there. He just kind of flies in for the Dolphins home games, and that kind of system where he's just kind of in one of the executive suites. He's here, and whatever guys will be whispering in his ear about, about Brian Flores, about Tua, about certain guys. He's kind of a bit too separated from the Dolphins to really have a good feel about where the organization's at, what's going on. I think Brian Flores is going to bounce back from this pretty well. I see this kind of as like a Bill Belichick being let go from the Cleveland Browns thing. As some of us remember, he was the Browns head coach after he won that Super Bowl with the Giants as their DC. But of course, a lot of the people in Cleveland didn't necessarily like him, including their owner, Art Modell. You know, he benched Bernie Kosar. He did all these different things. And they eventually let go of him when they moved to Baltimore. Of course, we all know what happened after that. He went to New England a little while after that. And he's probably the greatest head coach of all time at this point. I'm not saying Brian Flores will be, but, you know, like a lot of people have been saying, he's like a top candidate for all of these head coaching vacancies. I could see him potentially picking up a coordinator job or something, but I think it's more than likely that he ends up as a head coach at one of these places, being able to pick out and develop a quarterback that probably has some higher upside than Tua. And not only that, but more importantly, be able to establish his own culture within the team that he can set and not have it dictated by Chris Greer, not have this kind of weird power struggle that a lot of unhealthy and dysfunctional organizations have.
He's from New York, so maybe he becomes the newest head coach of the Giants. I still don't really understand why you would fire him. I know that looking back at some of the posts, how Tua didn't feel that much trust within the organization because they thought about bringing in Deshaun Watson, but imagine he gets hired in New York, Brian Flores, and Deshaun Watson comes to New York. But can Deshaun Watson even play because he has all those off the field issues that he's dealing with? So whenever you have a talent like Deshaun Watson, can he really even play in the league again? Because he's still dealing with that.
Yeah, it's really weird too, though. We really haven't gotten much of an update on that. Like, you know, it's all gone quiet. So hopefully we get some news one way or the other, whether or not he's just going to be out of the league completely or if he's going to be back on the market, because, you know, he's basically served a year-long suspension. At this point, it's what essentially has occurred. So, you know, we'll see what happens, and that's a whole other discussion. But for me, in terms of where Brian Flores should go, I really think like the Vikings would be an amazing fit because they really need someone to come in and fix that defense because they have the offense. They need the defense. I think the Bears could use him because obviously they're a great defense anyway. But maybe he can help Justin Fields with the confidence, bring in a really good OC to fix all the Matt Nagy nonsense that was going on. The Broncos could really use him. I mean, any of these teams could use him. But to me, I think between the Bears, the Vikings, and the Giants, probably, if I were Brian Flores, would be my top 3 destinations, and the Broncos. So one of those 4 would be my preferred destination for Brian Flores. And probably just kind of to wrap up this discussion, probably the weirdest thing I've heard about any of these openings, a rumor going around that the Vikings are looking at Lane Kiffin. At least that was a rumor that I saw. Currently the head coach at Ole Miss, used to be a coach of the Oakland Raiders back in 07 and 08. He's been in college football ever since. You coached at USC, coached at Tennessee for a year, coached now went under Saban when that rehabilitation clinic basically was OC, and now is at Ole Miss. And of course, he led them to their best season in a very long time. Do we think Lane Kiffin could make a successful return to the NFL? Because it was a spectacular failure the last time he went to the NFL, but he's a much older coach. I think he's improved a lot as a coach. I mean, I have my personal gripes with him for different reasons, but, you know, could we see that? Because obviously Minnesota has the offensive talent, I think, that he can use and exploit. But at the same time, we just saw a guy like Urban Meyer come up to the NFL and absolutely flame out. Yeah, what do we would think about that?
It's tough because, I mean, obviously he's been out of the league for a while, but also considering his situation, you know, Al Davis was still in significant control of the team and, you know, their direction where they would go. But he was, you know, on the downswing, you know, of his life. He died in 2011. I think he was kind of out of touch with the way that football was going at that time. And of course he was directly involved in picking Jamarcus Russell with the number 1 overall pick, which is another thing to keep in mind with Lane Kiffin's tenure. Jamarcus Russell was perhaps the biggest bust that the NFL has ever seen at the quarterback position. So he didn't have too much to work with in terms of the most important position in this league. But I mean, that's tough. But, I think part of the blame definitely still lands on Lane Kiffin and not being able to establish a winning culture with a storied franchise like the Raiders. We've seen a lot of college coaches like Matt Rule and Urban Meyer, Bobby Petrino. There's a lot of college coaches that end up not necessarily working out. And even some of the guys with a lot of success, like Jim Harbaugh, they ended up kind of faltering at their end of their tenures. So it would
Steve
definitely...
Carroll is probably the only real successful one in recent memory.
Yeah.
I think there are rumors about Jim Harbaugh also coming back.
Yeah, that's another name to watch.
Just
took Michigan. Yeah, just took Michigan to the college football playoff. Finally beat Ohio State. Very hot name right now in the NFL.
Yeah, we'll see if they keep Rich Bisaccia. I think they should, but that's one place where I think he was rumored to go to.
Yeah, I don't really see any other college coaches outside of those two being an interest. Of course, you could always have a surprise. I know David Shaw from Stanford's been rumored a couple of times for different positions, but I seriously doubt it. Of course, there's been so much turmoil on the college football side of things anyway with coaching that there's just not a lot of names left. But definitely, if anything were to happen on that front, I think it'd be Lane Kiffin or Jim Harbaugh. But we'll definitely talk about this way more in the weeks to come. But now it is time to get into some playoff talk, because we have 6 games to kind of go over here for the weekend. It's Super Wild Card Weekend starting on Saturday afternoon at 4:30. We have the Las Vegas Raiders and the Cincinnati Bengals. And then Saturday evening, we have the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. On Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, we have the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The mid-afternoon game will be the San Francisco 49ers at the Dallas Cowboys. The night game, Sunday Night Football, will be Pittsburgh and the Kansas City Chiefs. Additionally, we have a Monday night game for the first time. I don't know if it's the first time ever they've played a playoff game of Monday Night Football, but it's the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams. Of course, we have all the spreads here. Connor, if you want to kind of go over that real quick.
Yeah. So before we dive in more into the details of this game, what we think will happen, I'm just going to go into these betting lines. So the first game, Saturday at 4:30, the Las Vegas Raiders are going to Cincinnati, playing the Bengals. These betting lines have changed a little bit. I'm also looking at FanDuel right now. Also, shout out Pat McAfee show for creating this little infograph. So now the point spread's changed a little bit. The Bengals are favored by 5.5 points. And the money line, they're favored by 250. Raiders 200 plus 205. And the over-under for this game is 49. Personally, I would bet the over, as these are both two high-powered offenses. Derek Carr, despite losing Henry Ruggs, he's making do with what he has. He's making Zay Jones look like a serviceable wide receiver, which is hard to do. I know this as a Bills fan. And then the Bengals, obviously, with a high-powered offense, one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver tandem in the league. An elite quarterback in Joe Burrow, let's just say it, and a pretty good run game too. But I'm just going to start rolling through these again. Saturday, prime time at Highmark Stadium, Buffalo, New York. The New England Patriots are coming in and playing the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are favored by 4 points, minus 196 on the money line. And the Pats are plus 164. And the over-under is 44.5. Just going to keep rolling on. The Eagles are 8.5-point underdogs going into Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. On the money line, the Buccaneers are now minus 390, and the Eagles are plus 310. And the over-under is 49 points. Who knows what will happen with that, honestly. And then the Sunday game, the time is a little bit wrong on that infograph from what I can see. I think it's at 1 o'clock when the Niners are coming into Dallas playing the Cowboys. The Cowboys
It is the 4:30 game. Yeah, it's at 4:30.
Oh, it says on FanDuel that it's the 1 o'clock game. Okay, never mind. The app's wrong because they just had the Cardinals and the Rams on Sunday night when that's on Monday. So yeah, 4:30 game. Sorry about that. On the money line, Cowboys are minus 166. Niners are plus 140. And the over-under is 50.5. This next game, it's going to be the Steelers going into Arrowhead Stadium playing the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are favored by 12.5 points, minus 700 on the money line for the Chiefs, plus 500 on the money line for the Steelers, over under 46. And the Monday night wild card matchup, it's going to be the Arizona Cardinals going into SoFi Stadium playing the Los Angeles Rams. NFC West divisional matchup. The Rams are favored by 4 points on the money line. The Rams are minus 198, while the Cardinals are plus 166. And the over-under for this is 49.5. Now, where do we start? Do we want to talk about the Bengals and the Raiders?
Yeah, let's just I guess let's just go in order here. Because this Raiders-Bengals game is really interesting. Obviously, the Bengals just really kind of a Cinderella season. Probably the biggest surprise in the entire league this year. Joe Burrow, just the way he's exploded on the scene here. I mean, I've always highlighted him as a quarterback prospect. I remember watching him down at LSU, but he's really taken off way quicker than I thought he would, especially with Cincinnati and their offensive line situation. Jamar Chase probably just had the greatest rookie wide receiver season ever, or at least one of the top 2 or 3. Just absolutely spectacular what he was able to do throughout the season. And it's going to be interesting here because it kind of had the youth movement of Cincinnati versus a bit more of a veteran team in Las Vegas. Derek Carr has, been in the league for several years at this point. Never really gotten a chance, though, in the postseason. Because remember back in 2016 when he was having an amazing season, he got hurt. Couldn't play in the postseason, and we had to watch Brian Hoyer get drugged up and down the field by the Houston Texans instead. So this is his first true postseason game. So really, both quarterbacks here don't have any playoff experience, which makes things very interesting. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals are notoriously terrible in the playoffs. They haven't won a playoff game since, if you correct me if I'm wrong, 1993. Not since text messages have been a thing. I heard someone say that earlier. Have the Cincinnati Bengals won a playoff game? So, Paul Brown Stadium's going to be crazy in Cincinnati. But I'm just going to be honest. I'm just feeling the Raiders here. I think they are a much hotter team right now. I think they're playing with confidence. I think they know that they kind of really weren't supposed to be here with everything that they went through. And they're going to show up and they're going to take advantage of the youth of the Cincinnati Bengals because still got to remember that offensive line for Cincinnati is very questionable. Joe Burrow right now is not 100%. And we saw what the Raiders were able to do to the Chargers. Like Max Crosby was a force to be reckoned with the other night. I think this is a sneaky bad matchup for the Bengals. I really like the Raiders here to find a way to win and move on to the divisional round.
I'll agree with him. I really thought the Bengals would win maybe by a touchdown, but if it is 5.5 the spread, I take Raiders at 5.5. If the Raiders lose, I think it would be by a field goal. This could go into overtime, this game. This could very well happen, but I think with the momentum that Vegas has, they're going to be the ones facing the Tennessee Titans in the divisional round.
I'll pick the Bengals here personally, mostly because of the quarterback. Joe Burrow has been playing absolutely lights out these past couple weeks, besides obviously last week where Brandon Allen was in of course. They beat the Chiefs. Even I understand that, playoff games are much different than regular season games. Atmosphere, the stakes, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that definitely helps them, especially against the Raiders, who I think were blown out by the Chiefs both times. And the Raiders, I think both teams can be inconsistent, but I think the two most important factors are, one, that Raiders pass rush. It could definitely dominate playing this Bengals O-line. But also I think we've seen this past season, no matter what situation his O-line puts him in, Joe Burrow's just going to throw it deep to Jamar Chase, and it won't really matter. They've been overcoming those deficiencies, and they still went 10-7 and won their division. So I think that's all of that. Those things considered, I just trust the Bengals more in this situation than the Raiders. They'll end their playoff win drought, which is the longest in the league, by the way, longer than the Detroit Lions. So,
wow.
Yeah, I'm going with Joe Burrow on the Bengals here.
I think this one's just interesting compared to all the other matchups because both of them are having their playoff debuts. So we have to see which one will definitely live up to the pressure. But could be a close one.
Yeah. And speaking of playoff debuts, Mac Jones for the New England Patriots will making his playoff debut in Highmark Stadium in Buffalo. Of course, remember infamously a couple of weeks ago, Mac Jones only free passes in Buffalo. I wrote to a 14-7 win. But, obviously depending on what the weather forecast is, could they do that again? Obviously Josh Allen probably had his best performance of the season in Foxborough against the Patriots, a game that helped Buffalo win the AFC East. The Patriots have not looked as good over the last month. Mac Jones has been inconsistent, but they still got some really good running backs, especially Damian Harris. I know Ramondre Stevenson's had his moments throughout the year. Obviously Mario Judon on the defensive end position has been really, really balling all year. And of course, Bill Belichick. You can never really count out Bill Belichick as a coach, but I really do think that Josh Allen and this Bills offense are finally clicking. And there was a point there in the middle of the season where I was starting to get concerned about them, especially around the time when they lost at Jacksonville. But they really kind of got it going. Again, their running backs finally involved. Devin Singletary has had some good production recently amongst other backs. I like Buffalo to take this. I know that the Bills have not had their best of luck overall against the Patriots for the past 2 decades, but this isn't Tom Brady. This is Mac Jones, and I like the Bills to, especially in a night game in Buffalo, to hold on and secure a spot in the division round.
This one is very tough for me. Connor, what's the over-under again?
Let me look it up real quick.
This is so difficult to choose.
Yeah. Over-under is 44.5.
Wow, this is so tough.
Yeah.
On one hand, I want to go with the Patriots, but I also don't want to hurt Connor's feelings. But
go with whoever, man.
No. But here's the thing: I'm really thinking about it because Josh Allen took them all the way to the AFC Championship last year. But then again, it's Belichick back in the playoffs, but we've never seen Mac Jones play a playoff game. I'll have to take the Bills on this one. This could be decided by a field goal, maybe. So I don't know. I don't know what the spread, but I'll still go Bills -4 on that one.
All right. Well, y'all guys know who the hell I'm picking. Buffalo all the way this time, baby. But I am a bit worried, honestly. I'm gonna pull up the weather in Orchard Park on Saturday. The forecast, I think it's like partly cloudy, high of 9, low of -2. And it looks like around 8 p.m., which is when kickoff happens, it's going to be 1 degree. And then from there on, it's, I think around the end of the game, it'll probably be around -1. So that's going to be really tough. I don't think that it's going to be snowing or raining on that day, which I think will help the Bills a little bit. But even considering all of that, it's still going to be cold as hell. and there could be some wind. It says like wind is about 5 miles per hour at that particular moment in time in Orchard Park while the game's going on. Of course, that'll probably be changed as the week goes on. But I could see the Patriots leaning on their run game a bit more. I think they saw that, they trusted Mac Jones a bit more in that rematch at Gillette Stadium on December 26th. I think partly because of how good the weather was. Obviously, that didn't work out for them, considering the Bills beat them very convincingly. So, yeah, if they lean on the run game, that's going to hurt the Bills quite a bit. Even with that loss at Gillette Stadium, Damian Harris ran for over 100 yards and I think 3 touchdowns. So if this Bills offense makes any mistakes, which is definitely possible, especially considering how Josh Allen has done in some poor weather situations and also how turnover prone he has become. He did throw 15 picks this season. Yeah, I mean, I am going with the Bills because I'm biased, but it's definitely going to be really tough. If they trust Mac Jones too much, I could see the Bills winning easily, especially with their pass defense. But I will say about the Bills, these past couple weeks, at least the past month, Devin Singletary's really become the bell cow back. Something I think Nick talked about like a month ago or so. He was saying that, he would really like to see more of a run game from the Bills, even considering the caliber of the running backs. We don't have a Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry, and we didn't have necessarily the strongest O-line. I think that's changed a lot now. Ryan Bates has been playing really well at guard. Deion Dawkins is back killing at left tackle. So our O-line's improved considerably since our last matchup with the Patriots, which has helped clear up some holes for Devin Singletary also. But yeah, he's really found an identity as this bell cow back. He's been scoring at least 1 touchdown a game these past 4 weeks. Of course, we did play the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Jets. So keep that into consideration. But also the run defense, well, we did play some cupcake teams somewhat, no disrespect. These past couple weeks, the run defense has started to show up a bit more. We might be able to bring back Shaq Lawson, who was just released from the Jets, who was a pretty good run defender for the Bills from 2017 to 2019. On our practice squad, we could elevate him for this Patriots game. So that could help our run defense quite a bit, as well as Harrison Phillips really stepping up at the one tech position on the line.
You never know. So you brought it up in the past. Sorry to cut you off, but I brought up in the past. Mac Jones is going to have to throw for a lot of yards this game, maybe 300, 400. I think this playoff, he's going to have to be forced to make some decisions that might be comfortable or might be uncomfortable. He's definitely going to have to come out of that shell more. I don't think they're going to have I don't think they can rely on the run game as much to win that game, which is another reason why I'm picking the Bills for this, because Josh Allen has experience in the playoffs, and you never know. Who knows? Maybe the Bills do take it all the way.
And one thing too about Mac Jones too, I remember too, he did play in the college football playoff. Obviously, a whole different ball game than the NFL playoffs. But does any of that experience translate? I seriously doubt it, because he had superior talent at Alabama compared to what he's going to have here. But that is something I guess to keep in mind. And same for a guy like Joe Burrow, who played in the new college football playoff compared to some of the veterans who may have never gotten a shot to play in games like that. But moving on here to Eagles and Buccaneers, the early Sunday afternoon. To me, I think it's a pretty easy game to pick. No disrespect to the Eagles. It's been a fantastic season for them. Way better than I thought they would be. But I'm going Tampa. Philadelphia doesn't have a single win over a playoff team. In fact, they only have 1 win over a team with a winning record. They beat up on a lot of bad competition. They don't have a great passing game. A really good rushing game, one of the best in the league. Only problem is Tampa Bay has one of the best rushing defenses. If you want to beat Tampa Bay, you got to be able to throw the ball. I just don't trust Jalen Hurts enough right now. Doesn't have the best weapons around him in the passing game. So I think Tampa's going to win this one pretty comfortably. Mike Evans is back. He's balling right now. Tom Brady's going to dink and duck like he always does, and put up a ton of yards. He doesn't throw that far in the air, but it's just the way it goes. And I think they'll win by at least 2 to 3 touchdowns. I don't think this will be that close, so I'd put money on the Bucs to cover.
Yep, I agree with you. I am interested in the matchup between the running game of the Eagles and the the defensive run defense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But we have seen the secondary of the Bucs not be as good as last year whenever they won the Super Bowl. So probably one of the more easier picks, if not the easiest pick of this matchup. Bucs will cover. They will win by a couple touchdowns. I agree with you, Nick.
Yeah. What you guys said. Eagles fans, you had a great season. Buy your t-shirts, because that's pretty much as far as you're going to go. Sorry. But let's get into this 49ers-Cowboys matchup. As we said before, probably one of the more interesting matchups of this wild card weekend.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Cowboys, it feels like at times this year there was an argument that they might have been the best team in the NFC. Obviously, what they have on defense this year with Trayvon Diggs and Micah Parsons, 2 rookies that have transformed the Dallas Cowboys defense. Them and the Titans are probably the 2 most improved defenses from last year, where both of those units were just horrible, to this year where they're really freaking good. And, obviously Micah Parsons has had the most sacks in a rookie season since Lawrence Taylor, which, when you're in league with that guy is just an unbelievable sentence to say for any rookie. And obviously that could create some problems for Jimmy Garoppolo, who, he's really a game manager. He isn't going to go out and throw 400 or 500 yards. Like, that's not his style. The 49ers are going to mix it up. You're going to try to get the ball to Deebo Samuel in a lot of creative ways. You can try to get the ball to Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings. A lot of different guys you can get the ball to. Of course, Elijah Mitchell, if he is more healthy, he could be a big part of this game. But to me, I think the really X factor for the Niners is George Kittle. Against the Rams, he had 5 catches for only 10 yards. It was really not a factor. I think he's got to be a factor in this game. And I think him versus a guy like Micah Parsons, potentially in coverage, that could be a decisive factor here. And on the other side, I think you got to put everything onto Dak Prescott. Don't let Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard beat you. I saw in terms of percentages of eligible touches, Tony Pollard, I believe something like 43% of his touches went for 5 or more yards, most in the league out of any running back. So he's a highly effective runner. I think the Cowboys really should use him more than they do, but obviously you got to justify it. Given Ezekiel Elliott $90 million, CeeDee Lamb on the edge, we know what he can do in terms of explosiveness, and all the other weapons like Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper and Dalton Schultz. So the Cowboys, to me, have that more talent here. But this is just one of those, I have a hunch that I feel it's been a while since the Cowboys have been in the postseason with this current core. And I don't know, I feel like the Niners are going to have something more to prove here because they got the win, they got that huge momentum building win to get into the postseason. The Cowboys obviously had a huge win Saturday night against the Eagles backups. I'm feeling the Niners. Even though I think the Cowboys are the better team, there's something about this Niners team. I think they're going to take care of the football. They might go the Cowboys into making a couple of critical mistakes here. And I think they're going to find a way to pull off the upset in Dallas. I think they're going to play solid defensively. I think they'll run the football effectively. And, Jimmy Garoppolo's going to find a way, I think, to make 1 or 2 clutch plays, which might be enough to take out Dallas and get slimed. Because remember, this is the Nickelodeon game.
I agree. Jimmy Garoppolo also has the playoff experience, too. He's been a winner in San Francisco. He took them to the Super Bowl where they somehow lost against the Chiefs. I have to go with San Francisco because here's the thing. If Trey Lance was not in this last game, they wouldn't have made it. And I said this before. I even thought Trey Lance was going to lose against the Texans, which he didn't. But I have to go with Jimmy Garoppolo, his experience, young team. Deebo Samuel can bring an explosive performance. We'll see what happens with George Kittle, Juwan Jennings. I'm excited for this game. This one's definitely, in my opinion, the most exciting one. Sorry, Connor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you both. I think this Niners team definitely has the potential to beat these Cowboys. I think one really important part about this Cowboys teams, I know I've been harping on for these past couple weeks, but it's their coaching. Mike McCarthy, we've kind of seen the Cowboys falter a little bit this past month. Of course, they beat the Eagles backups pretty badly this past Saturday. But other than that, like, they lost playing the Cardinals, and they haven't really looked all that great in terms of the other playoff contenders within the NFC and just within the NFL in general. Like I say all the time, Mike McCarthy is a guy that coasts off talent. Besides that, he doesn't really bring much to the table. And I think Kyle Shanahan is just better equipped to roll with the punches that the Cowboys give him. Niners win and cover.
Yeah, so we're all in the Niners. So that might make any Cowboys fans watching feel better. Obviously, the Cowboys haven't been to the NFC title game since, I believe, 1994? It's been a long time for them, too, for a team that gets talked about as much as they do. Certainly, they got some demons to exercise here in this postseason. So we'll see if America's team can get back on top. But the nightcap on Sunday, Steelers-Chiefs. Is anyone going to pick the Steelers here? I think
Not me.
99% of America is going to pick the Chiefs. Of course, we saw this game a couple of weeks ago. It was a beatdown, not even really that watchable of a game. I will say this. I think the Steelers will play better this time around.
Agreed.
Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger is what he is at this point. He isn't going to put up much, but I do think he'll take care of the ball. I think Najee Harris can have a couple of big plays, but it just isn't going to be enough. I think they hang around for a little bit, give Ben Roethlisberger a bit of a respectable send-off. But Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce are going to take care of business here. And Nick Bolton will have a big game on the Chiefs' defensive line. Defense for me. Give me the Chiefs. In terms of covering, I don't know. I think that's a risky play because I could see the Steelers losing by only 10 points or something like that.
Yeah, I'll take Steelers 12.5 on that one.
I'm going to pick the Chiefs to cover. I think the Steelers offense has just been terrible these past couple seasons. And I mean, we saw that playoff game last year against the Cleveland Browns. Of course, they ended up coming back quite a bit, but the game was over probably by the first snap, honestly. And Cleveland was up 28-0. I think maybe after the first quarter, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and this Chiefs team is much better than that. And I think the Steelers might be worse, honestly. Because
worse than they were last year. I mean, they weren't 11-0 this year like last year.
Yeah, they're down Juju Smith-Schuster, and also they still had Marquise Pouncey and David DeCastro. Of course, they were on the back end of their careers, but still, I felt I had more faith in that offensive line back then than I do now. Yeah. I don't see any way that the Steelers win this game or even make it any close. I think they probably score a sad touchdown, but that's all I'll say about it. I do hope they win, though, because I have full confidence that the Bills could beat the crap out of them. I mean, I know that the Steelers beat them in week 1, but I think this Bills team has much improved from the first couple weeks of the season, and the Steelers haven't.
Yeah, well, if the Steelers won, they would actually be coming to Tennessee. And, of course, obviously, the Titans did lose to the Steelers a couple of weeks ago, but that was a self-inflicted loss where the Titans outgained them by nearly 200 yards but had 4 turnovers. I think the Titans would crush the Steelers in a rematch, if I'm being dead honest. So I'm rooting for the Steelers here, too. I just don't think they're going to have much of a shot of winning the game.
But it's just me and you that think 12.5. Are you plus 12.5 also, Nick? Or
yeah, I would. I'm not going to personally play the game, but if I had to play, I would play a plus 12.5.
I'm playing minus 12.5.
I don't know. I agree with Nick on how they might lose by maybe 10 points because I think it'll be more competitive. But the Chiefs will win. But
yeah, and they could have that sad touchdown in the end where like maybe it's like I don't know 27-10, and then Ben Roethlisberger gets one last touchdown as a walk off, and they lose like 27-16.
Right,
that's possible. Yeah, it's definitely a possibly a good play, especially considering the points. But moving on to this last matchup, marquee NFC West divisional matchup, the Rams playing the Cardinals at home. Yeah,
this is the toughest one in my opinion to pick because you don't know which teams you're going to get here. We're going to get the Arizona Cardinals that we saw the first half of the year, and we're the best team in the NFL. That came in the national, dominated by Titans, and just were on a roll. But then the second half of the year, like I had been warning everyone, Cliff Kingsbury teams fall apart in the second half of the year. Now, this is probably not the worst fall off that I've seen from a Cliff Kingsbury team, but still bad enough to lose the NFC West when you had a multiple game lead. Not great, but you did make the playoffs, so it's obviously not the worst situation. But the Cardinals are beat up. They don't have DeAndre Hopkins anymore. Kyler Murray, it feels like now is having to run for his life a lot. The last time I watched him was against the Colts, and the D line for the Colts was just dominating that game. And honestly, like just if they were playing any of the other NFC teams, like the Cowboys or the Buccaneers, I would be picking the Cowboys or Bucs over the Cardinals. The Rams here are an interesting question because, as I said earlier, which Matthew Stafford's going to show up? Is it going to be the one in Detroit that couldn't get it done in big games, or is it the one that we've seen throughout the year, like in games against the Bears and the Bucs, where he was just lighting it up? And we know that he has a guy like Cooper Kupp who set records this year. Has been the best receiver in the league. Odell has some nice production. Cam Akers is back for the Rams and is able to produce in that backfield.
I think, sorry, man, but I don't think this is as hard as a decision for me. I'd take the Rams easily on this one.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry. I agree with Leon on this. As Nick's been talking about lately, as well as some things that I've been seeing, the Cardinals have fallen off quite a bit. Kyler Murray isn't quite the MVP kind of candidate that we saw earlier on in the season. They did beat the Rams early in the season in their first matchup, but of course they lost 30-23. I think about like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I personally, I'm picking the Rams just because that they're built right now to be a Super Bowl contender. Early on in the preseason, I could have seen the Cardinals going to the playoffs. But I just don't really think that they are that really juggernaut team that they would need to be in order for me to be more confident in them. I mean, I think JJ Watt might be coming back, but I don't know if that'll be enough to really help push them over the edge and win this game. Of course, Matt Stafford could come back to his Detroit ways, maybe throw a pick or two. But I just think with the way that the team's built, I think the Rams win this one.
Yeah, but at the same time, we just saw them blow a 17-0 lead the other day. So that's why I say it's hard, because the Rams, to me, on paper, should have been the best team in the NFC this year. But the fact that they're all the way down at the 4 seed tells me something's a little off, right? Because just if you look at what they have both on the offensive and defensive sides, like I think they have more talent than the Packers. I think they're equivalent to the Bucs. I think they have more talent than the Cowboys, just slightly. But they're behind all those teams, and it's because of the inconsistency. And I know the Cardinals have been inconsistent, but we can remember, too, the Cardinals did go to Dallas 2 weeks ago and beat them. And obviously, the defense played very well in that game. They were able to run the ball. And then that's really where I like the Cardinals. I like their running attack. I like James Conner. Chase Edmonds has finally come back. If they're able to establish a running attack here, and I know that's going to be difficult against the Rams, but if you're able to do it, the Cardinals are going to have a shot here. In terms of who I'm going to pick to win, I will agree with y'all. I think it's going to be the Rams, but I think it's going to be really close. I think this will be a very entertaining Monday night game, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Cardinals won, because I don't trust the Rams. I don't trust Matthew Stafford. Even though they have all the talent in the world, this just feels like a team that could lay a massive egg in the playoffs and be one of the biggest disappointments of the year.
Well, I think we still have to see what happens with DeAndre Hopkins, his injury, but with the Rams, it's like they've invested too much in this team for them to just lose in the first round. I see the Rams winning by 10 or 14. And Connor, what would be the over and under on this game for our viewers?
So the over under on this game, I think, it's 49.5.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in agreement. Would we all take that over if you had to?
I'd say so. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm trying to think the math in my head. So I would think the Rams would get probably to 28. The Cardinals, in my opinion, maybe get to like 24. So yeah, I probably would take the over too.
Yeah. And then next week they would face Green Bay if they would win. Then it would probably be Bucks and whoever wins that 49ers and Cowboys game. Because, Rams are a 4 seed, yeah. So, these are some interesting matchups. Some of them are actually pretty tough to pick, but some of them are more easier. So we'll see what happens as we go into that divisional round.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch and a lot of fun to break down. Yes, we'll be going through round by round here on the Insta Review podcast throughout the season and all the additional content on our various social medias. But it is time to do our players of the week to wrap up episode 18. I'm going to go to you, Leon, first. Who did you choose to be your player of the week?
Well, I think there were multiple players I could have picked. Rob Gronkowski had a great game against Carolina. Rashad Penny played well against Arizona. But Derek Carr did take his team to the playoffs, even though it was 186 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kind of reminded me of that Thanksgiving game against the Cowboys where he just led them to victory. And even though the stat lines aren't big, he's thrown for over 4,800 yards this season, barely just over that mark. And for him to take a team to the playoffs over teams like the Colts, over teams like the Dolphins, is nothing short of impressive. So I have to give it to him on that note.
Connor, who is your player of the week?
So I'm going to pick Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions. He caught 8 passes for 109 yards and a touchdown and also ran for 12 yards. He's definitely a legit wide receiver. I didn't expect it personally. He was a 5th-round pick, but he's really shown up and been the best wide receiver on a quite depleted wide receiver core in Detroit. Of course, they're going on a rebuild, but I think he could be a really key piece within that Detroit rebuild, and I am excited to see what he's going to do next season in Detroit.
Yeah, from a fantasy perspective, that's probably one of the players I'm really interested to see how he develops in terms of his value, because I really think that's someone who could help you win next year. Because I know in the fantasy playoffs this year, he was absolutely massive for a lot of teams. But my player of the week, I've talked to him about him a bit earlier, Juwan Jennings, 6 catches, 94 yards, 2 clutch touchdowns to help the San Francisco 49ers get into the playoffs and really prove they belong in the NFL. The story, he got briefly kicked off the team while he was in college during a coaching change, had to work his way back onto the team. When he tried to get into the NFL, he had a 4.72 40. A lot of people thought he couldn't get into the league, but got that 7th-round draft pick and has finally worked his way up into the depth chart and with these 2 touchdowns and has really proved that he belongs in the NFL. So definitely all of us back here in Tennessee are super proud of Juwan Jennings and very excited to see what he can do. Hopefully he can make a big player too in the postseason and just really add to his name, because this is a guy, as I said earlier, that makes big plays when the lights are brightest. All right, guys. To wrap up the show, do y'all have any last topics and comments you want to touch on?
Go Bills.
Yeah, sure. Go Bills, go Titans, go whoever your teams. But something that I was thinking of is, what if Teddy Bridgewater was healthy these last 3 games? Do we think that the Broncos could have maybe made a playoff run? Because he shocked a lot of people this year, and I think he is well deserving to be a starter next year in Denver. Just some brief thoughts.
I don't know. I mean, obviously they were in some really tight games down the stretch. Outside of last week, they got blown up with the Chargers, but they were in a tight game with the Raiders and a tight game this past week with the Chiefs. And obviously, the Chiefs had to win that game and hope the Titans lost to get the number 1 seed. And they got some talent there. They got some really good wide receivers. Of course, Drew Lock's not the answer long term. John Elway, unfortunately, busted under their quarterback pick. And I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater long term is the fix. I think part of the issue too is just it's not going to be the most exciting brand of football with Teddy Bridgewater. I do think that's one thing NFL teams do have to bring into consideration. What entertainment value are we bringing to the fans? And Denver fans, ever since Peyton Manning retired, have been subjected to probably some of the worst football in the league. Not in terms of wins or losses, just in terms of what it looks like on the field. So I think there is going to be a demand and appetite for a new quarterback. I do think Teddy Bridgewater will find a place somewhere. I just think it's going to be in Denver.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing who they bring in as quarterback 1 for the Denver Broncos next season. I think with Teddy, like maybe they could have gone 2-1 with those last 3 games, but obviously, even if they did win those games, they'd still just like be 9-8, and that wouldn't be enough for the playoffs. But yeah, hot take. I think Jimmy G is going to be the Broncos quarterback 1 next season. I don't think they'll trade for Aaron Rodgers. I think either he'll retire or stay put in Green Bay. But also be on the no. They're not looking at Brian Dable as offensive coordinator, or Joe Padden, or actually no, I think Joe Schoen. I think that's his name. The Bills assistant GM and the Bills offensive coordinator. They've been floated around for the Bears and for the Giants, but I haven't seen them come up for the Broncos. I was going to say that I think wherever those guys go, if they end up getting a head coach GM tandem gig somewhere, which I think is very possible, I think they'd bring Mitch Trubisky out to fight for a starting job.
And that's someone I think who should have another shot, because I know he wasn't great in Chicago, but he had his moments, and we'll see maybe outside of Matt Nagy's clutches whether he can be a effective quarterback. I guess my final take to wrap this all up.
He deserves it too.
Yeah. My final take here is, honestly, when I heard a couple of years ago when the NFL was going to go to 18 weeks, I thought it was a mistake. Like, there's going to be more opportunities for injuries. I don't really see. I feel like it might take away from the postseason, it might take away from the season as a whole. But Sunday was probably the best final Sunday that we've ever seen. Like, the drama, multiple overtime games. Every window had something to fight for. 1 o'clock was Titans fighting for the 1 seed. The 4 o'clock window, we had the 49ers and Saints duking out for the last spot. 8 p.m., the drama of the tie possibility, keeping the Steelers out. It was fantastic. It's just another demonstration of the NFL, despite any of the criticisms it gets. It is the best ran sports league. It is the most forward-thinking sports league, and that's why they went to an additional week, and that's why they've expanded the playoffs. Without those two things, this past Sunday would not have meant as much as it did. It would not have been as exciting as it was. So it's, you do have to get up to the NFL, because just consistently, again, showing why it dominates the ratings, why it dominates the American sports conversation, and not just because there is less of the games, but because truly it is the most exciting product. Because you're not going to have a final day in the NBA like that, or the NHL. Very rarely do you get an MLB final day like that. But NFL, even with the additional week, might have actually enhanced the final Sunday instead of taken away from it.
Yeah, I agree. Jake Fromm, first NFL touchdown. We didn't get shut out this time or held to a field goal, so sure. I really enjoyed it. 3 overtime games that had many or multiple playoff stipulations. I liked it, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Yeah, but with all that being said, thank you for listening to another episode of the Instant Review podcast. This has been episode 18. Stay tuned as we recap the wild card weekend. Can't believe we're saying that. We've been doing this for the entire season. We have a couple more weeks left to go here of the 2021 season, as we are on the road to Los Angeles, who will be playing for the Lombardi Trophy. We'll see you again next week. For Leon Taryan, for Conor Kennedy, my name is Nicholas Hill. Take care, everyone. and enjoy the first weekend of the NFL playoffs.